While Hollywood loves battle scenes and heroic soldiers, the most devastating war stories happen far from the front lines. America churns out combat epics by the truckload, but somehow manages to ignore the films that capture war's true aftermath. These forgotten gems expose the wounds that don't bleed and the battles fought in kitchens and bedrooms long after the guns fall silent. Number 12. The Best Years of Our Lives, 1946. You think you know post-war cinema. This William Wyler masterpiece won 7 Oscars, yet somehow vanished from America's cultural memory. 3 veterans return home to find America isn't what they remembered, and they aren't the men who left. Wyler's genius wasn't just casting real-life veteran and double amputee Harold Russell, who won an Oscar despite never acting before. It was having the guts to show America its uncomfortable reflection. Marriages strained to breaking, PTSD before we had the term, and the economic panic of men who couldn't find work in the country they'd saved. The infamous bank scene where Dana Andrews' character defends a fellow veteran's loan application still cuts like a knife. "You'll have to give him a loan or he'll die" isn't just dialogue, it's the unspoken reality thousands faced. Critics called it unflinching, but audiences in 1946 found it almost too honest. At nearly 3 hours, Wyler refused to rush the psychological homecoming that sometimes took years. What makes this film criminal to overlook is its refusal to offer easy answers. There's no triumphant parade, no simple healing. Just ordinary people trying to recognize each other across the chasm of war experience. When Fred Derry says, "Last year it was kill Japs, this year it's make money," he's exposing the whiplash veterans felt in a nation eager to move on. Somehow, America celebrates far inferior war films, while this legitimate masterpiece gathers dust. Number 11. Till the End of Time, 1946. Before The Best Years of Our Lives stole its thunder, Till the End of Time was delivering the raw truth about veterans that America wasn't ready to hear. 3 Marines return home to discover that fighting for your life is sometimes easier than living it. Director Edward Dmytryk gives us Guy Madison as Cliff Harper, a boy who left and returned a man nobody recognizes. His parents treat him like a child while expecting him to be a hero. It's psychological torture played out in quiet living rooms. The film's brilliance isn't in battlefield flashbacks, but in moments like Cliff staring at his childhood room, now an alien landscape of innocence he can never reclaim. Dorothy McGuire delivers a performance Hollywood tried to forget as a war widow who sees in Cliff a chance to heal, even as she represents everything he's trying to escape. Their scenes together are master classes in unspoken trauma. But it's Robert Mitchum as a veteran with a metal plate in his head who steals every scene, foreshadowing his legendary career. The film caused controversy with its brutal portrayal of anti-Semitism when Bill Williams's character faces prejudice despite having fought fascism overseas. Even more shocking was the riot scene where ex-Marines battle American fascists in the streets, a political powder keg RKO executives nearly cut entirely. Till the End of Time vanished in the shadow of Wyler's bigger production, but cinema historians know the truth. This film walked so The Best Years of Our Lives could run. Its use of Chopin's Polonaise, reimagined as the title song, created a melancholic backdrop that perfectly captured the beautiful tragedy of survival. Number 10. The Men, 1950. Marlon Brando's first film isn't just overlooked. It's practically buried, despite delivering the most honest portrayal of disability in post-war America ever filmed. Director Fred Zinnemann throws you into a veterans hospital where paraplegia isn't just a condition, it's an identity forced upon men once defined by physical prowess. Brando's Ken Wilczek doesn't just struggle with paralysis, he rages against a world designed to forget him. The scenes between Brando and his screen fiancée, Teresa Wright, aren't about romance, but about the brutal negotiation of what love means when everything changes. When she asks, "You think you're the only one who's been crippled?" she's not being cruel. She's articulating the invisible wounds that war inflicts on everyone in its path. What makes this film revolutionary is that Zinnemann used actual paralyzed veterans as cast members, decades before authentic casting was even a concept. These men deliver lines with a rawness no trained actor could match, particularly in the legendary card game scene where they discuss their sexual futures with grim humor that censors somehow missed. The film bombed commercially. America wasn't ready to see its heroes reduced to learning how to dress themselves again. Critics recognized its brilliance, but audiences stayed away from uncomfortable truths. When producer Stanley Kramer screened it for veterans groups, several walked out during the brutal physical therapy scenes. The Men didn't just launch Brando's career, it created a template for honest disability representation that Hollywood promptly ignored for the next 70 years. Its most devastating moment comes not in dramatic confrontation, but in silence, as Brando watches an older veteran demonstrate the painstaking process of getting from wheelchair to bed, a daily Everest that war asked them to climb for the rest of their lives. Number 9. Home of the Brave, 1949. Here's the World War II film that exposed America's dirty secret years before the civil rights movement made headlines. A black soldier returns home with psychological trauma, only to discover that the country he fought for still sees him as a second-class citizen. Director Mark Robson created a powder keg disguised as a war drama. James Edwards delivers a performance so powerful it should be taught in film schools as Private Peter Moss, a soldier whose PTSD manifests as psychosomatic paralysis. The film's genius lies in its use of flashbacks to reveal how racial trauma compounds war trauma, creating wounds within wounds. When Moss finally screams, "I killed a man who called me a dirty and..." the raw confession of internalized rage left 1949 audiences in stunned silence. The studio expected commercial suicide. A film about race in post-war America seemed destined for boycotts. Instead, it became a modest hit, proving that audiences were hungrier for honesty than Hollywood executives believed. Critics praised its unflinching approach, though Southern states predictably banned it or cut crucial scenes. What makes this film criminal to overlook is how it connects war abroad with war at home. Lloyd Bridges plays a white soldier who confronts his own prejudice after watching his friend die, only to return to an America that expects him to maintain the status quo. Their friendship becomes a mirror for the nation's hypocrisy, willing to bleed together in foreign lands, but segregated at home. The therapy scenes between Edwards and Jeff Corey's doctor character created a template for cinematic depictions of PTSD decades before the term existed. When Moss finally walks again, it's not just physical healing, but America taking its first tentative steps toward confronting its racist foundation, steps that, like recovery, would prove painfully slow. Number 8. Some Came Running, 1958. Frank Sinatra stripped of all charm and swagger? That's the revelation of Vincente Minnelli's bruising portrait of a failed writer and Army veteran whose homecoming to his Midwestern town exposes the rot beneath America's post-war prosperity. This isn't the sanitized 1950s of nostalgic imagination. It's a pressure cooker of resentment, sexual frustration, and crushed dreams. Sinatra's Dave Hirsch returns to his hometown with nothing but a manuscript and a chip on his shoulder, only to find himself caught between worlds, the respectable society that rejected him and the gambling, drinking underclass that accepts him without question. The film's genius is in how it connects his war experience, not to specific trauma, but to a fundamental alienation from American values. Shirley MacLaine delivers a heartbreaking performance as Ginny, a good-time girl, whose unquestioning devotion to Dave makes her both pathetic and the only authentic person in the film. When she says, "I just want to be near you, that's all," it's not just desperate love, but a stand-in for the unabashed honesty veterans craved after years of patriotic propaganda. The film's visual style is as bold as its content. Minnelli uses CinemaScope to create suffocating compositions where characters are trapped by their environments. The carnival sequence that ends in tragedy uses color and movement not as celebration, but as nightmare, a technique that influenced everything from The Godfather to Taxi. Driver critics initially dismissed it as melodrama, missing how it diagnosed the illness beneath America's post-war boom. The film's most subversive achievement is showing how veterans like Dave weren't just damaged by war, but by the hollowness of what they found when they returned. A society more concerned with appearances than truth, more committed to forgetting than healing. Number 7. Forbidden Games, 1952. War doesn't just kill bodies, it murders innocence. René Clément's French masterpiece delivers the most devastating portrait of childhood trauma ever filmed, following a 5-year-old orphaned during the Nazi invasion of France. This isn't just a foreign film Americans ignored. It's one they actively avoided because it demolishes every comforting myth about children's resilience. Brigitte Fossey delivers perhaps the greatest child performance in cinema history as Paulette, a girl who witnesses her parents' death in a strafing run and then forms a bizarre friendship with a rural boy. Together, they create a cemetery for dead animals, stealing crosses from the village church in a grotesque imitation of the adult world of death that surrounds them. The film's genius lies in how it portrays trauma, not through tears and nightmares, but through distorted play. When Paulette insists on burying a dead mole with Christian rites, despite understanding nothing about religion, she's processing horror through the only frameworks available to her developing mind. Critics were stunned by the film's unflinching gaze and its refusal to offer catharsis or healing. Religious groups in America protested its blasphemous portrayal of children misusing religious symbols, missing the point entirely. The film isn't mocking faith, but showing how war corrupts even the most sacred human experiences. The final scene, where Paulette screams for her dead dog among a station full of refugees, created such discomfort that many theaters cut it entirely. Forbidden Games won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Film, but was largely shown in art houses rather than mainstream theaters. Its most subversive quality isn't its anti-war message, but its suggestion that war's damage to children might be permanent and unredeemable, a truth so unbearable that audiences preferred to look away. Number 6. The Search, 1948. Before Montgomery Clift became a Hollywood icon, he delivered a performance so raw and naturalistic, it changed screen acting forever. Fred Zinnemann's The Search follows an American soldier who befriends a lost Czech boy in post-war Germany, creating a heartbreaking portrait of war's smallest victims that America has somehow managed to forget. Shot in the actual ruins of Berlin when the rubble was still warm, the film has a documentary quality that makes today's carefully constructed war films look like theme park rides. Real displaced children were used as extras, many still traumatized, creating background scenes of devastating authenticity. When young Ivan Yandel as Carol refuses to speak after separation from his mother, it's not just acting. Many child extras were exhibiting the same symptoms of shock. The film's genius lies in its refusal to sentimentalize either the relationship between soldier and boy or the horror of Europe's displaced persons camps. When Carol finally speaks, shouting, "I don't want to go back to the camp," it's not a cathartic breakthrough, but a desperate plea from someone who's seen too much of human cruelty. Clift's response, "You don't have to go back, I promise," carries the weight of a vow he has no right to make. Critics recognized its brilliance immediately, with James Agee calling it one of the few completely honest films about World War II. Audiences were less enthusiastic. Americans in 1948 were eager to celebrate victory, not confront its human cost. The scenes of children being processed like cattle, tattooed with identification numbers reminiscent of concentration camps, but now done by Allied forces, proved too uncomfortable. What makes this film criminal to ignore is how it connects personal trauma to systematic failure. As Clift's character navigates military bureaucracy trying to help one child, the film exposes how institutions designed to help often perpetuate suffering through their very structure. A critique as relevant today as it was in 1948. Number 5. The Cranes Are Flying, 1957. Soviet cinema isn't just propaganda and montages. The Cranes Are Flying delivered the most visually stunning and emotionally devastating portrait of wartime separation ever filmed. While Americans were watching sanitized war romances, director Mikhail Kalatozov was creating pure visual poetry about a woman whose fiancé leaves for the front, never to return. Tatiana Samoylova gives a performance of such raw, emotional power as Veronica that it makes Hollywood actresses of the era look like they're barely trying. Her famous running scene through Moscow streets, after learning of her lover's departure, created a new visual language for depicting emotional distress. The handheld camera moves with her, making viewers physically feel her desperation. The film's genius lies in showing war's devastation without a single battle scene. When Veronica is assaulted during an air raid, the camera spirals with her trauma, creating a visual metaphor for violation that censors couldn't cut. Her subsequent marriage to her dead fiancé's cousin becomes not just personal tragedy, but a symbol for a nation forced to compromise to survive. Critics worldwide recognized its brilliance, awarding it the Palme d'Or at Cannes, the only Soviet film to ever win. American critics praised it, while audiences largely ignored it, unable to reconcile its humanity with Cold War propaganda about soulless Soviets. The infamous crane shot that gives the film its title, Veronica looking skyward at migrating birds while surrounded by returning soldiers, created a visual metaphor for hope that directors still reference today. What makes this film revolutionary is how it dared to suggest that war's greatest victims might be those who survive. When Veronica gives her bouquet to another soldier's wife at the film's conclusion, it's not just a gesture of solidarity, but a radical statement about collective grief in a supposedly collectivist society. American films of the era couldn't approach this level of emotional complexity about war's aftermath, and most still can't. Number 4, The Last Stage, 1948. Some films aren't just overlooked. They're actively avoided because they're too honest to bear. Wanda Jakubowska's The Last Stage was the first feature film about Auschwitz, made by a survivor on the actual grounds of the death camp, just 2 years after liberation. This isn't entertainment, it's testimony disguised as drama. Jakubowska cast actual survivors alongside actresses, creating scenes of such authentic horror that several crew members collapsed during filming. The barracks used as sets were the same ones where prisoners had been held months earlier. When an actress playing a guard shouts orders, former prisoners working as extras instinctively fell into formation. Trauma responses captured on camera that no modern film could ethically recreate. The film follows multiple women prisoners, focusing on their solidarity rather than individual heroism. Its most devastating scenes show the mundane logistics of mass murder, the methodical processing of new arrivals, the casual cruelty of female guards, the desperate maintenance of humanity through small acts of resistance. When a prisoner risks death to smuggle medicine to others, it's not presented as exceptional courage, but as the minimum moral response to systematic evil. Critics recognized its importance immediately, but audiences stayed away. Americans in 1948 were not ready to confront Holocaust realities beyond simplified newsreels. The film's insistence on showing female prisoners as complex humans rather than idealized martyrs made it particularly challenging. When a prisoner collaborates to save her child, the moral ambiguity was too uncomfortable for post-war narratives about good versus evil. What makes this film essential viewing is that it exists at all. Jakubowska began writing the screenplay while still imprisoned in Auschwitz, believing that survival meant nothing without testimony. The film's final scene, where prisoners march toward liberation as Nazi guards flee, uses actual footage of camp liberation integrated with dramatic recreation, a formal choice that collapses the distance between document and art, history and memory, in ways that remain unmatched in Holocaust cinema. Number 3, Sunday in August, 1950. While American cinema was busy with grand narratives and moral lessons, Luciano Emer created a neo-realist masterpiece about ordinary Romans enjoying a summer day at the beach. This isn't just a film Americans overlooked. It's one that challenges everything we think we know about post-war storytelling. No heroes, no villains, just people trying to find joy after years of occupation and deprivation. The film follows multiple storylines: a young couple's romance, a middle-class family's day trip, workers spending their only day off, creating a mosaic of post-war Italian life more honest than any documentary. The genius lies in what's not mentioned. Fascism, war, and poverty hover just off-screen, informing every interaction without dominating the narrative. When a father scolds his son for wasting food, it's not just parental discipline, but the shadow of recent hunger. Franco Interlenghi and Anna Baldini deliver performances of such natural authenticity that they seem captured rather than performed. Their beach flirtation, alternating between shy glances and bold declarations, captures the peculiar optimism of youth in a damaged society, the determination to create normal lives from abnormal circumstances. Critics praised its lightness of touch, but American distributors couldn't figure out how to market a foreign film where nothing happens. The scenes of crowded beaches and bustling trains confused audiences expecting rubble and suffering in post-war Italian cinema. Yet, it's precisely this focus on ordinary pleasure that makes the film revolutionary. It insists that recovering from war means reclaiming joy, not just rebuilding infrastructure. What makes this film criminal to ignore is how it shows post-war recovery as a communal rather than individual process. The beach becomes a democratic space where class differences temporarily dissolve and strangers form brief communities. When rain forces everyone to run for shelter, the shared disappointment and improvised solutions create a metaphor for national resilience more powerful than any patriotic speech. Number 2, It's Always Fair Weather, 1955. Gene Kelly dancing on roller skates? That's the only thing Americans remember about this subversive musical that dared to suggest that war buddies might grow to hate each other in peacetime. Directors Stanley Donen and Gene Kelly delivered a bitter pill wrapped in Technicolor candy, a musical about disillusionment so honest it practically killed the genre. 3 war veterans reunite 10 years after V-Day, only to discover they have nothing in common beyond shared trauma. The film's genius lies in using musical conventions to expose post-war emptiness. The trio's opening number shows their wartime camaraderie, while their reunion dance is deliberately awkward and forced. When they finally reconnect, it's not through reminiscence, but through confronting their present failures. Sid Charisse delivers the film's most subversive performance as a television producer, using the veterans' reunion as exploitative content, a meta-commentary on how America commercialized war experience. Her number, Baby You Knock Me Out in a Boxing Gym, serves as both spectacular entertainment and critique of how women had to fight for professional respect after entering the workforce during wartime. Critics were baffled by its tonal shifts, and audiences expected Kelly's usual optimism, not a musical where the protagonists spend most of the runtime avoiding each other. MGM executives demanded rewrites of the original ending, which reportedly had the 3 men going their separate ways without reconciliation, a truth too bleak for the studio, but more honest about how war connections often dissolved in peacetime. What makes this film revolutionary is how it uses the musical genre not to escape reality, but to confront it. When Kelly performs I Like Myself on roller skates, it's not just spectacular choreography, but a moment of authentic self-acceptance after years of post-war performance. The film suggests that America's post-war prosperity was similarly performative, a colorful distraction from deeper discontents that would eventually erupt in the 1960s. Number 1, Hail the Conquering Hero, 1944. Preston Sturges didn't just direct comedies, he planted satirical bombs that are still exploding decades later. Hail the Conquering Hero might be the most subversive film about military heroism ever snuck past American censors, a comedy about a discharged Marine who becomes a fake war hero that exposes the hollow heart of patriotic myth-making. Eddie Bracken delivers a masterful performance as Woodrow Lafayette Pershing Truesmith, the over-patriotic name itself a joke, a young man discharged for hay fever who's too ashamed to tell his mother he never saw combat. When a group of actual Marines decide to help him save face, his hometown transforms him into a hero so quickly that the truth becomes irrelevant. They need the hero more than they need reality. The film's genius lies in how it connects military mythology to political corruption. When Woodrow's fake heroism leads to his nomination for mayor, Sturges creates a devastating portrait of how war credentials were exploited for political gain long before "I served" became a campaign slogan. The scenes of townspeople projecting their needs onto Woodrow create a timeless commentary on America's relationship with veterans, simultaneously worshipped and exploited. What makes this film revolutionary is how it was released during active wartime, July 1944, when criticizing military heroism was practically treason. Paramount executives were terrified, but military officials surprisingly approved it, recognizing that its target wasn't soldiers, but civilian hero worship. The film's most devastating line comes when a real Marine tells Woodrow, "Nobody wants to hear the truth if it's unpleasant." Critics recognized its brilliance, but its reputation has faded compared to Sturgis's other classics. That's criminal, because its message about how Americans prefer comfortable myths to uncomfortable truths about war remains more relevant than ever. When Woodrow finally confesses, and the town elects him anyway because he told the truth, Sturgis delivers his most subversive suggestion, that honesty about war might be the rarest form of courage in American life. These overlooked dramas don't just tell better stories than the war films Americans typically celebrate. They expose uncomfortable truths about how nations recover from conflict. While Hollywood keeps churning out battlefield heroics, these forgotten gems remind us that war's longest battles happen not in trenches, but in bedrooms, town squares, and the wounded psyches of survivors. Which of these overlooked classics shocked you most? Comment below and tell us which film America needs to rediscover before we forget what honest war storytelling looks like.